This is a 102.7 FM Toowoomba original podcast.
Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. And today we're talking to Nicole Morris, who is the Director of Australian Missing Persons Register. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Nicole, I've been chasing you for a long time because I came to your launch of Vanished.
Yeah.
Was that your first book
It
that
was
you had
my
written?
first, yes.
And you've since written another one called Missing?
Correct.
Is that?
Yep.
So tell me about the register. Why have you done it? Who's it for? Why is it different to an official or a police site?
When I created the register, it was the only one. So that's basically why I did it. I've always been curious about mysteries and missing persons ever since I was a child, and so I always had that interest. In 2005, so 20 years ago this year, I saw a documentary about missing persons that made it clear there was no national database for missing persons. When I went onto the internet to find information about missing persons, there was very little. So I thought, I can do that. I will teach myself how to make a website, and gathered all of the information about missing persons that I could find onto a website. I was scanning books, old true crime books that I had myself, and getting photographs and putting it all together to create this resource for the public, so that there was something, so that the missing weren't forgotten in history and, you know, part of old newspapers that get thrown away, and there was something more permanent because these people hadn't been found, and there's thousands and thousands of people still out there who have never been found. So the website is primarily for them, for the missing, and for their families, and for the public to access information.
And what were you sort of envisaging? Were you thinking that someone might think, oh, that person looks familiar, I wonder if they're, or, you know, their story sounds a bit strange, and they could go and find a picture, or...
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing that happened, and this is a story I haven't really told anyone else, was I was showing a friend of ours the website, and he was looking through, and I said, okay, this is what I've just put together, and have a look at this. And he's looking through, and he stopped on one photo on the website, and he said, "That's my mother." And I said, what are you talking about? I know your mother. And he said, no, that's my mother. And I said, how can that be? And then this entire massive, long story unravelled. But basically his mother had been a missing person when she was younger, had disappeared, started a new life, had my friend, and I was with her when she died. I knew this woman, and she was on my own website, and I didn't recognise her because it was when she was young. So that, I think that really cemented to me, people are going to find people that they recognise on my website. That was 20 years ago, and it's still happening. There's still people coming forward with information, and cold cases are still being solved. So,
that is a chilling story. Really
it's a very long,
chills.
involved story.
Yeah,
That's the small version of it.
So tell me, why isn't there a central database from the police or from government or someone?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And there's still, I think it's, I don't know, is it state by state red tape, something you would be familiar with in your career? You know, the states don't talk to each other very well. Sometimes they've all got different laws. It's very difficult. The case that was highlighted, I think, when I started the register was that there was someone who had a missing aunt, and then remains were found, and there was nothing to tie those two things together. There was no computer to say, these are the remains that we've got, these are the missing people. There was nothing talking to each other. That didn't make sense to me. So it's just government red tape, really, and it's still not a great system. It's certainly better than it was. But one of the cases in my second book, she went missing in Queensland, but there were possible sightings in New South Wales. And so the family were going to New South Wales Police going, oh, look, there's a possible sighting of our missing person. And this is only less than 10 years ago. And New South Wales Police were saying, what are you talking about? We have no record of that person. And this is just over the border. It's crazy.
It does sound crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly with the advent of the internet, you would think that is the simplest thing. I know you say that this website is the voice of the voiceless for missing persons. So what in you, sort of, I know that you talk about Trixie Belden. Tell me who Trixie Belden is.
Trixie Belden. That was when I mentioned that I had an interest as a child. Trixie Belden was a fictional detective, and I had every Trixie Belden book, and she solved mysteries, and I just loved it when I could work out who the perpetrator of the crime was before the end of the book, and I loved that. And I think that's what sparked my attention. I love a mystery, but working with the missing, it became very evident to me very quickly that these people are not fictional characters. They're not people you see on television. They are real people. That's why I wrote the books as well, because I wanted to say these are real people with full lives, and we have to respect that and not treat them as we would a character in a film. That was what sparked my interest with Trixie Belden as a child, Trixie Belden books.
Yeah. Tell me about, I know you say, I'm not a detective. I'm not a... I'm not here to solve the mystery tell me about that, and the expectation or the weight that people must put on you in terms of a hope for the hopeless, I guess.
I think I've said that for 20 years, and since writing the books, I may have changed my views a little bit, only because when I do the research for the books and I start to uncover things that the police haven't, and that really annoys me because it's something they should have done. But for the 2 cases that I've done most recently, in the 3rd book that I'm writing, I found a witness who saw this missing girl on her last day, and the police know nothing about him. And then the 2nd one, I've dug up, people who may have taken photographs of this missing person on his last day. So I think there's something to be said for digging deeper, and perhaps it's just that the police are under-resourced, and, once a case goes cold, they don't have the resources and the manpower to put into it to keep going. When do you stop with a missing person if there's absolutely no information about them? When do you stop investigating? Because there's nothing to investigate. If you can keep that person's photo and information out in the public, then that's what you've got to do. That's what you've got to do. That's the only way you're going to find them.
How are you able to uncover things that the police haven't? It's just talking to people, creating sort of generating energy around the cases with this website, and how is that?
I think it's mostly the Facebook page, the social media aspect of what I do, because the Facebook page now has almost 200,000 followers, and during National Missing Persons Week, which is coming up in about a month's time, it's actually I think a month today possibly, then my posts, I put out every case on the register, I put onto the Facebook page, which takes a very long time because there's about 2,600 of them, and those posts reach 1 million people, over 1 million people, which is extraordinary to me. I could never have imagined that my posts would get 1 million people looking, and it's really exciting. So I think I've managed to put the call out. So if I want information about something, I'll ask 200,000 people, and they'll ask all of their friends, which maybe now I'm asking 500,000 people the one question, and I will get an answer. And so in the case of the Suram that I'm writing at the moment, I put up her photo on her anniversary. She's been missing for over 40 years, and someone came forward and said to me, "Hey, I saw her." And I said, "What do you mean you saw her?" And then I managed to verify his story. So social media, with all of its evils, has amazing power for good as well.
Isn't that incredible? And I would imagine that the police don't use social media?
Do to a certain extent, but they'll generally, if you've ever seen a missing person post put out by the police, and if someone makes a comment saying, "Oh, I think I saw him at McDonald's yesterday," the police will say, "That's great. Can you please call 1300 333 000?" Which is great, but they're not personally following up on all of these comments. They're just relying on the person to actually report it through official channels. So I think that's maybe the difference, because I would never let a comment like that go. I would jump on it, message them, say, "Tell me everything." So
what you then jump on it, and what do you do then with that information?
Oh, well, for me, I can put it into a book, and I think in the case that I'm writing at the moment, the perpetrator of this crime is almost certainly dead. So it's very difficult to get the police interested in a case that they will never be able to prosecute. And that's the case that with Norman Lawson that you mentioned. All of the people in that case, that was a case from my first book, all of those perpetrators are dead. So the police are never going to reinvestigate that. There's no resources available for them to put effort into something that will never have an outcome. So it's really only if I had information about a crime that where a person is still alive, absolutely. I contact the police all the time with information, even small bits of information.
Where do you start though, Nicole? Like you've got this information, you'd almost need to have one person that you contact within the police. I would imagine all the staff changes around. Did the police do you sense that they like having people like you, citizen investigators, or do they just think, lady,
Yeah, it's a bit of both. And because it's Australia-wide, what I do, and there's hundreds and hundreds of different police stations, hundreds of thousands of police officers involved in different cases, it's really hard to get one person. So sometimes I do, I called the detectives in Sydney the other day and he was saying, okay, now what's this information that you have? And I said, okay, do you have any idea what I do? And he's like, no. Okay, righty-go. Well, let's start from scratch. But then again, sometimes I interviewed an inspector for the second book and she was absolutely fantastic. So she was like, yep, this is great. I want to get this information out there. So some police officers are absolutely 100% on board. And I think once, because I've been doing this for 20 years, they know that I don't have another agenda and I'm not some crackpot who is just trying to get attention for myself, and that I actually am genuinely doing what I do. And it's just, I have an altruistic reason for finding the missing. So I think that they kind of then say, oh, okay, well, all right, keep going. That's good. And they do, when someone goes into a police station to report the missing, I have had families say, the police told me to contact you. So that's really good.
Right. So that's making progress. I'll just remind the listeners that they're on 102.7 FM. We're on Big Little Small Talk. My name's Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and we're talking to Nicole Morris, who is an author and the director of Australian Missing Persons Register. Let's talk about the quantum of people that are missing in Australia. What sort of numbers are we talking about? Believed to still. I mean, how do you separate them? When you say a missing person, when do you say believed dead, or when do you take them off a register, or do you ever?
56,000 people a year go missing. Over 99% of those people are found within about a week. Not always alive, but mostly. There's about 2,600 people who are long-term missing persons. That is someone who has been missing more than 3 months. That's regarded as a long-term missing person. As to when they are no longer regarded as missing, that's never until remains are found. So that's really, really important for a family. And I think even when a family has been through the trauma of an inquest and going to court for a coroner to declare that their missing person is deceased, even then the case is not closed because we don't have remains. We don't know what happened to that person. So they can be really distressing for a family because they think, oh, they're giving up, but they're not. It's just a formality that they need for various other reasons. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've got people on the register from the 40s. So, yeah.
Nicole, talk to me about this term that they use, ambiguous loss. What does that mean?
Ambiguous loss is a term that describes a grief that cannot be resolved, really, because it's when someone dies in a car accident, for example, you know what's happened. You've still got the loss. You're still grieving over that person, but you know exactly what happened to them. You have somewhere to bury them. You have a place that you can go to remember them if that's what you choose to do. With a missing person, you've got the loss, but you have no idea what's happened. So you've still got that ambiguity of grieving over something, but you don't know what you're grieving for. The brain can invent thousands and thousands of scenarios as to what has happened to that person, and that's torturous for these families because what they can imagine is probably far worse than what's actually occurred. Ambiguous loss.
Yeah. So that lack of having a body, as it were, is sometimes worse than having a body.
Yes,
yeah,
very much so.
When I was thinking about talking to you, I was thinking about the havoc that having a missing person must wreak in people's lives, and the sort of knock-on effect of suicides and other things that happen to a family. Just the ruined marriages and the things that happen. And you're getting and dealing with that and hearing people's stories?
Yeah, there's no preparation for it. I mean, I have some mental health training and I work in aged care, and so I see a lot of death, I see a lot of grief. So I can kind of prepare myself for it. But there are things that you'll never forget. I had one girl who rang me one day and she was sobbing and she said, "Oh, they've found some of the body, but they can't find the head. Nicole, why can't they find the head?" And I'll never get that phrase out of my head. "Nicole, why can't they find the head?" You know, that's traumatic, but it's not happening to me. So I can maintain that kind of distance and say, okay, my family's okay. This isn't happening to me, which allows me to have the strength to help them. So if I fell apart, I would be completely useless for them.
Yes,
but yeah,
and I suppose that's what you have to think. Tell me about the circumstances of corresponding with Anne-Marie. Is it Makita?
Makita,
yeah. Tell me about that.
She was the mother of a young teenager who was abducted, a series of abductions from Truro in South Australia in the 70s. And that was one of the books that I pinched off my mum as a teenager just to satisfy my curiosity about missing persons. And this is what happens to a missing person. They don't just vanish. And what's the story behind this? And this was an awful, awful serial killer who thankfully was killed in a car crash even before he was brought to justice, but because he would probably be out of prison by now without justice. So I'm glad that he's no longer around to terrorise people. But he abducted several young women in Truro, South Australia, and their stories were so traumatic and compelling, and I was just very captivated by it and felt very moved, particularly by Anne-Marie's story and about her daughter Juliet. And so I just said, "Mum, I have to write this letter to her to say I'm so sorry about what happened to your daughter." And she wrote back and she was very touched by that. And it's like, oh, okay, wow, these people are real. And that kind of started to solidify it. Okay, this is not entertainment. This is not, you know, some trashy movie. This is real. This girl lived. She was, you know, just a couple of years older than me, and someone took her. And that can happen in the world, and that's wrong. And so all of these things are forming as you're a teenager. All of that's what forms you, your personality and who you are and what you believe in passionately. And that's helped shape, I guess, what I ended up doing.
So how long did you write to Anne-Marie?
Just a few years, and she ended up passing away. And since, I've had people contact me who knew her and were close to her and said, "Oh yes, we remember that." So
they remembered you writing that. She mentioned that you wrote to her.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any of your letters back?
No.
She kept.
Yeah.
So did you feel a sense of responsibility that you were a young person, or almost a guilt, I guess, and writing to her? Did you get that sense from her at all?
I think I just wanted to make her feel better. I think that is, you know, as a teenager, you just, and perhaps it just developed my sense of empathy. It wasn't too deep for me, I think. I just wanted to make her feel better. I just wanted to say, "Hey, I read your story. Your daughter sounded amazing. I'm so sorry." That's just what I wanted to say, basically, as a teenager.
In your letters, did she want to talk about Juliet?
Yeah, she did. Yeah. And the families do. They really need you to keep talking about them. People sometimes think, "Oh, well, I can't mention that because it'll upset them." There's nothing you can possibly say that is worse than what they have gone through, and it would be worse if you forgot them. And so they do need to keep talking about them.
Well, as you say, the voice of the voiceless, and that's what the website is, isn't it? I mean, tell me who Detective Sergeant Stephen Page is.
Detective Page. This is a long story. I'll keep it a bit concise, but I'm not sure if you're aware of a terrible, terrible series of gay hate crimes that swept Sydney in the late 80s. And weirdly enough, I actually worked on Oxford Street in 1989, and I had no idea this was happening. And I still can't, because I had that interest in missing persons and crime. And how did I not know that that was happening? But there were a lot of young men going missing in Sydney in the 80s, a lot of them around the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And years later, they discovered that there were gangs of youths that were abducting these men. And basically, many of them were thrown off cliffs in the eastern suburbs. And once again, the failings of police, they did nothing. They certainly didn't connect them. They didn't investigate them. There was a lot of homophobia. It was like, well, what do you expect to happen if you parade around the streets of Sydney? You know, someone's obviously going to bash you, and that's okay. That's to be expected. And this wonderful police officer said, no, this is not okay, and there is something wrong, and managed to connect them all. There's still, I have at least 2, possibly 3 of those men are still missing, and they're on the register. Some of them, a lot of them were found dead, and this police officer was just didn't give up. And in the face of his colleagues that were saying, oh, forget about it, you know, that's not an important crime to investigate, he said, no, this is going to happen. So, yeah, he was wonderful.
Has someone just been prosecuted just recently with one of those crimes? I thought I'd seen some of that in the media as well.
Yeah, there was one. It was in a slightly different area. That actually happened off North Head, which is the Northern Beaches. The other crimes were happening in a city, Sydney. I'm not sure what the connection is with that particular perpetrator, but yeah, there was definitely an undercurrent of hatred at that time, and I'm so glad that we've moved on from that today.
Nicole, where, you know, when you think about 10 years, 20 years, where are you sort of thinking you'll be? Where are you going with this?
Well, I didn't really, 20 years ago, I didn't think to myself, oh, well, I'll be doing this for 20 years. It just kept going. And I think I had really young children at the time, and now they're in their 20s, and my life has gone on. I went back to work, and I had to juggle working and still doing the register, and then I chucked another ball into the mix of juggling and wrote the books. And so then I've got all of this going on, but I love it because I hate to be bored. And so if I can keep going and keep helping people, then, you know, I think we have a responsibility in our lives. If we can see somewhere that we can help others, we have to. So, you know, what's the point of being alive? What's the point of having a society? If you're able to help people, then of course you must.
And is it like putting a piece in a jigsaw puzzle that you're just getting a little bit closer each time when you get a little bit more information?
Even if you don't get any information, just even the act of putting up their photo once a year for Missing Persons Week, the families say, thank you for not forgetting them. And how sad is that they have to wait a whole year and they never forget. They don't forget for a single day. And they just get that one little bit of joy and happiness to see, hey, there's my person's photo and Australia is seeing them again and they're not going to be forgotten. And so as long as there are still people that need that, then I'll of course have to keep going, and I would love to keep writing as well.
When I was looking at the website, I was struck by this tool that you have, or pictures of aged progress images, which I thought was fascinating because, you know, they're not obviously a 15-year-old boy or a 40-year-old woman anymore. They've moved on. So, and I also looked at the photos and thought, imagine if you were that family and you open that up. It'd just take your breath away. It'd catch you every time. Are you evolving your website in different ways?
I think so. It's just getting the time to do it. You know, I want to have a page of people who went missing with their cars, because sometimes it's easier to spot a car than a person. So I want a page of cars so Australia can look out for unique cars. So yeah, pages like that. I'd like to put more homicide information out there as well. The age progression images are amazing. They're actually produced by the federal police, and sometimes the families will come to me saying, how do I get one of those? And so I can then liaise with the federal police and say, this family would really like this to happen. Can you help with that? And so we've got the ball rolling with those as well. They do it in an amazing way. They do it by taking photographs from the family's older family members. They don't just put it through a computer program. They actually take existing photos, so of the missing person's mother and grandmother, and they put those images into the composite because we tend to age like our ancestors. It's fascinating the way that they do it.
So when the kids put that aging
The filters.
on me and I look like my grandmother, maybe that might be not quite so accurate. Do you think?
If you like the image.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's better than looking like my grandfather, I suppose, is one thing. That's right. Can we talk about some specific cases? Because, the things that you uncover and as you go along, and I know at the launch of your book, you had a lot of the families there and sort of that raw trauma, I guess, was just so evident that night. Tell me about the case of Kay Doherty and Tony Kavanagh and what happened with that. And
two schoolgirls, 15-year-old schoolgirls down in Wollongong in New South Wales. Tony was quite a popular girl. Kay was a little bit quieter and shyer and much more protected and wasn't really allowed out. And so she told her mum that she was just going over to a friend's house to babysit. And even that was difficult for her mum to allow her to do. And instead the girls were sneaking out to, we think, a disco. And so they were seen waiting possibly for a bus, but possibly in an area where cars might stop if they were hitchhiking. This was in 1979 and the girls have never been seen again. And weirdly, in that particular case, there were letters sent home a few weeks after they went missing that said, hey, we're just with some friends in King's Cross and we're fine and we'll be home soon. One family does think it was Tony's handwriting. Kay's family does not think the letters were from her. To make it even weirder, there were two other cases from around the same time, sort of 78, 79, of other girls in Sydney who had weird letters sent home to family. So that puts a different spin on things. Those girls were possibly thought to have been maybe used as drug mules to go to New Zealand, but I don't see how they could possibly have used these two 15-year-old girls for that. And there is strong evidence that perhaps they were victims of Ivan Milat, who was working on the road at the time in the same area. And he definitely was very active in the 70s, particularly 78, 79. So that's a possibility as well. There's another possibility that was it's an acquaintance of theirs, a relative of an acquaintance, so they might have known the acquaintance and possibly gotten into a car with that person. It's just a lot of maybes and a lot of trauma for two families. And just yesterday, actually, the brother of Kay Doherty went to the New South Wales Parliament because a Member of Parliament for Western New South Wales presented a petition to Parliament with 10,000 signatures asking for better investigations into all of these missing persons. And so her twin brother stood up in Parliament for her yesterday. And, this is how many decades are we down the track, and this is still so important to him that he needs to stand up and speak for Kay.
We said before about the long tale of, and do you ever know those parents die with that agony and all of that? Let's talk about Norman Lawson. You did mention him before, his case and what happened with him.
Yeah, it's just an absolute tragedy. Since I wrote it, it's one of the ones that people will often want to talk to me about. It really struck a chord with people, I think. Just 16 years old, same age as me. He should be sitting here at the age of 55 and he's not. And he was an amazing kid, an Indigenous kid who grew up in the Northern Territory, had his own timber business, employed people even though he was 16 years old. An amazing kid. He wanted to be a doctor, or a lawyer, to give back to his community. And he went on a trip that was possibly a camping trip, and his family are still to this day, they can't understand why he went out with these people that he basically knew not very well. Normally, if he'd go camping or fishing, he'd go with his best mate, but he went on a trip with 4 individuals who were a lot older than him, and only those people came back. They didn't ever report him missing. They said they had a vague story about him taking off, running down the road and leaving his stuff behind, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And they then scattered to various parts of the state and to different states. None of them were ever brought to justice. They've all now passed away. Horrifically, it is pretty likely that Norm probably met his fate with a crocodile in one of the billabongs in Kakadu. And the other weird part about that was his father ended up finding his rifle, which had been sold to a park ranger who then managed to show it to Norm's father. And it was the I know nothing about rifles. What's the
barrel?
Yes, the barrel. That's it. the barrel. I was going to say the bit with the hole in it. Yes, that was packed with a yellow clay. So it looked like it had been used as a digging tool for that clay to be wedged up into the barrel. And that particular clay came from an area around Kakadu that was quite close to where they had been camping. So it perhaps looked like he had maybe been placed into somewhere that had been dug out and then possibly moved into a crocodile-infested area. But I don't think we'll ever find Norm, and I don't think we'll ever know exactly what happened. And no one's ever going to be brought to justice for that. And that's absolutely tragic, because he has a brother and sister who are just so, it's devastated both of their lives. His sister has a lot of health issues, so does his brother actually, and his brother has had a lot of emotional issues over it as well. He still rings me and they both break down. It devastated that family.
So I read a testimony from his brother, Norm's brother, who said he got involved in a lot of crime and he was stealing money and putting it in envelopes on his parents' porch with, please use this to investigate the missing person here. Yeah. So just the acting out and he said his relationship with police is very poor.
Yeah, he doesn't trust them at all. And thinks, I mean, there's obviously an issue with possibly Indigenous incarceration, which is a whole other issue as well. But I think in Murray's case, he just lost so much faith in the police because they did nothing to try and find his brother. It was just, is he just a runaway Aboriginal kid? Nothing was ever done. No one was brought to justice. So you would lose a lot of faith. And he didn't know how to handle that, and his family went through difficult times as well. He didn't really have that guidance or leadership to show him what to do, and he lost his best mate.
You're listening to Big Little Small Talk. We're talking to Nicole Morris, who is the director of the Australian Missing Persons Register. Are you fascinated by true crime podcasts?
I don't have time to listen to them, but I have appeared on a great many of them, which is strange. I think because I probably know just about all of the people involved in the true crime podcasts, then it's difficult for me. I don't get caught up in them because I already know the story, and I've already been telling the story for years. Like the Marion Barter podcast, I was the only person who would put Marion Barter on a website. So
tell me who Marion Barter is.
Marion Barter is the mother of Sally Layden. Marion Barter went missing in the late 80s and is the subject of a podcast called The Lady Vanishes, which has been heard by multi-millions of people. It's one of those viral podcasts.
A bit like The Teacher's Pet.
Yeah, exactly. And see Lynette Dawson as well. I have had Lynette for 20 years on the website and no one cared. No one cared until Hedley Thomas came along. So I think it's very exciting that they're getting those stories out there. But because I've been pushing it for 20 years, it's not a surprise and it's not a fascination for me, because I know Sally very well and I know the Dawsons, not Chris Dawson's family, but I know Lynette's family well, and so I feel like it's like, well, it's about time that they had a little bit of...
Is that the only thing that's going to be the saviour of these cases? Are books like yours and true crime podcasts to suddenly bring public attention to these things? Is it unsolvable in a way?
I don't think that Chris Dawson would have faced trial without the podcast. I think people don't know how close to the wind Headley skated with it. And a lot of these podcasts, they're great for putting the information out there, but the way the law works in Australia can be very difficult. And a lot of the judges in these trials, if there are criminal charges pending against these people, then the lawyers will come back and say, hey, you've just put out a podcast which accuses my client, therefore he can't receive a fair trial, therefore you should dismiss all the charges. And that happens in so many different trials. It almost happened in the Daniel Morcombe trial. So people don't realise what these public almost accusations can result in. But the flip side of that is, unless you tell people what happened, how do people know the Bronwyn
I've been
Winfield?
To the Bronwyn Winfield.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I know her sister well. And, I pick and choose my words extremely carefully all the time and say things like it's fairly obvious who killed a lot of these people. But if you come out and say that, when it comes to trial, if they do manage to move forward and say, yes, we've got enough evidence to go to trial, then they're going to say, hey, he's already been convicted in the court of public opinion. So
jeopardising the trial.
That terrifies me, because that is so much more important than the podcast, in my view. And I think, but again, without the podcast, you're not going to get to that point of charging. So, it's really a catch-22, isn't it?
It is. And it seems so incredible that someone can vanish. In the Bronwyn case, her own mother had gone missing for a couple of years, and that was part of the sort of reason why she was dismissed as being a sort of a bit, skiddy and whatever, wasn't it? Mental health issues. Yeah. What's the kind of the longest that you know of that someone's been missing and then turns up? You would think in this day and age it's almost impossible, but it seems not.
If they turn up alive, do you mean?
Yeah. And they've gone off and
rare.
Tried to live another life.
Yeah. I did have a case, years and years and years ago, that I had someone, I had one man on the register. His family then messaged me and said, you can take him off the register because he's just died. And we've only just found out about this. He was well aware that he was a missing person. In fact, he used his missing person photo that you had on the website as his Facebook profile photo. Why did he never come forward? Some people just want to withdraw from the world. So he was missing for a very long time, and his family weren't notified until he had passed away. They had no idea he was still alive.
Someone with children, and
I can't remember in that particular. I've dealt with so many. I can't remember if he had children or not, but I think it was his sister-in-law who contacted me. So maybe he didn't have children, and he just kind of withdrew from the world. His mother was looking for him for such a long time. She would ring me constantly, like once a month. Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? So she died never knowing. So he was missing for a really long time. There was another one I had a man who faked his own suicide in the 70s and left a wife and children, and then turned up as the mayor of an outback town 20 or 30 years later. So that was an amazing thing. Why would someone do that?
Do you think that they forget that they've created a whole new life for themselves and just sort of forget?
Do they just think no one is looking for them anymore? Or do they live with this secret for all of these years?
What about the most famous missing Australian, Harold Holt? What do you know about that? Or what's your theory?
Well, he disappeared before I was born, so it was not something I was grew up knowing about at the time. I think it's probably just simply a matter of walking into the sea and drowning, because it happens. It's probably the most common way someone is going to go missing from misadventure, because we live on an island with a very treacherous coastline everywhere. We have people missing constantly from walking into the ocean and never coming back out. So I would say the simplest explanation is the most accurate one. I think, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, abducted by submarines and taken by Russians and all of those things. I think that even a Prime Minister can have an accident. So, yeah.
Yeah. In your experience, Nicole, you said that, is fact stranger than fiction? Do you think a lot of these missing people have perfectly logical explanations? It's just we can't find out what it is, particularly with things like I'm thinking about, CCTV footage now and dash cam and things. Yeah. Is it harder or easier to disappear? Or just no rhyme or reason?
Yeah, people still do disappear, and the numbers are increasing all the time by at least 1,000 a year. I don't know if that's because of the times that we're living in, post-COVID and the cost of living and mental health crisis and no access for people, particularly in regional areas like we're in. It's really hard to go and see a mental health professional. It's really expensive. It's really hard to get an appointment. It's really hard to get a diagnosis. It's all of those things. So maybe life is just more difficult for people now.
But to be missing.
Yeah, to go missing. I think it is hard to go missing because we need to verify our identities all the time, which is difficult. I paid my rates the other day and had to verify my identity to pay my own rates and all of that kind of thing. So
weird.
Yeah. If someone else would like to impersonate me and pay my rates, that would be fine.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a digital footprint in this day and age that we didn't obviously have 40 years ago, but we've still got people going missing at an alarming rate. And I think because they deliberately conceal themselves, and we live in a country where it's easy to physically conceal yourself if you want to. There's thick bushland everywhere, there's coastlines. You can disappear, sadly, if you really want to do that.
Because they're using all of that technology, like pinging off the towers and all of that sort of thing now, aren't they, as well? Yeah, and
that's right.
Obviously whether their bank accounts have been accessed and things as well.
Sure. But I think people are aware that that's how they get tracked as well. So they'll turn off their phone and they'll use cash if they really want to disappear for a short time. But most people don't disappear and start a new life. It's too hard to do that. And particularly if you've disappeared because you're going through a crisis, you don't have the ability to create a new life, get a new job, and to cut off ties with every single person. You might want to leave your husband, but you're not going to leave your mum, and you're not going to leave your sister or your cousin or your best friend. You don't cut off ties with every single person that you know. There are people who might want to go off grid and go and live in the bush for a while, and those people do get reported missing sometimes, but generally most people don't want to disappear.
For someone who's been living in the bush for the last 2 weeks, I can tell you it wasn't much fun. I couldn't count the number of times that on the Bronwyn podcast, though, that everybody said she would not have left those two little girls.
Yes.
I couldn't account it.
Yes,
so
exactly.
People don't sort of go out of type, I guess.
Yeah,
do they?
Exactly. You're a mother, I'm a mother. There's no way I would ever leave my children. And that's, having said that, sometimes they might leave them because they can't cope anymore. There are suicides of mothers who think that their children will be better off if they're not around. But to leave them and start a new life, to leave your children, extremely rare for a mother to do that. And when you hear stories of a mother who has seemingly walked out, you just think, really? Okay.
So you said that you're working in aged care. Is that what you're doing with how you're earning a living, I guess, as well as your sale of your books, of course, which you never see in the book bin? No, definitely not. But you have recently been on a trip. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. I went to Japan the second time that we've been to Japan. This trip was for almost 2 months. So it was partly to see the beautiful cherry blossoms and partly to see our really good friends over there. But I also did a lot of research research for a future book about Japanese missing persons because I just love Japan. I mean, I'm not alone in that. I think half of Australia's in Japan at the moment, aren't they?
That's right.
But my friend over there paid me the ultimate compliment and said, "You're not a tourist. It's like, after 2 months, I'd say you can say that you're living here now." So,
what's unique about Japanese missing people? How hard is it for you to immerse yourself in that world?
It's completely different. I think what I struggled with is wanting to kind of shake them and say, you're not doing this properly, which is really hard. There's a lot of privacy. So what I do over there doesn't exist. So you will never see a missing person photo anywhere. You'll never see missing persons. It's very rare to see them in the media unless they're children or very vulnerable elderly missing persons. And the way they look for an elderly missing person is to drive around in the street with a big loudspeaker broadcasting. And that happens all the time. They have fixed speakers on street corners and broadcast, we're missing an elderly lady and she was last seen wearing a red dress. But they also have, that seems a bit primitive, but they also have amazing technologies. They're developing AI cameras that can analyse people walking down the street and analyse their gait, and their clever computer thinks to themselves, okay, this is a person with dementia and they are walking as if they are wandering. They're not walking with purpose. So this person could be a person with dementia who is wandering. And I work in dementia. I've worked in dementia for 10 years. So it's something I'm very familiar with. And it makes me look at my people and go, okay, they walk differently. They don't walk going to a particular place. And so those cameras can then send an alert to the police saying, can you just go and check on this person because our computer thinks that they're lost. And that's just by looking at them with a street camera. So amazing technologies.
The conspiracy theory people listening to this thinking that the government's controlling us with those.
Absolutely. But in Japan, they would welcome that. Well, I also had a great meeting over there with their local council, in a particular local council, who are putting little tiny GPS trackers inside the shoes of residents with dementia. Yeah, but it's saving lives. Yeah. I think that's and maybe that's better because I work in a secure unit, so I have to keep my people locked up to keep them safe. And maybe it would be nice if I could put a tracker in their shoe and say, yeah, go for a walk. But there's highways and there's rivers and there's all sorts of hazards that you have to worry about constantly with people with dementia, and so it's what is the best option? Who knows what is the best idea? But they've got some good ideas happening. And I had some other really good meetings in Japan with the North Korean abductions in the 70s and 80s. North Korea abducted hundreds of Japanese citizens and they're still over there. So that's something I don't think people are aware of. I went to the infamous suicide forest to prove that it wasn't scary and haunted and horrible. And it was absolutely beautiful. It was peaceful and calm. And it's a place, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a forest in Japan near Mount Fuji where hundreds of people go to take their own lives. And they're not sure why. They just go into this forest and take their own lives each year. It's a weird thing to do, but it was a really beautiful place. And I didn't find anybody's, but it was snowing the day we were there, so we sort of trudged through the snow through this forest. And
when's the expected time for your next book to come out? Have you got anything in mind?
Hopefully I will have it finished early next year, and my publisher would really like it to be out for Missing Persons Week next year, so around about this time next year would be good.
The best with that. Now, can you answer me, Nicole, in 3 words? I am curious, passionate, and happy. All right. If you were to have a favourite royal, who would your favourite royal be?
I have to tell you a story. So when I was a little girl, my grandmother really wanted me to marry Prince Edward.
Oh, okay.
And she was obsessed with it. She just thought, and she kept this going for the longest time, to the point where she wrote me a letter pretending to be him And I believed for the longest time, I believed that this letter was from Prince Edward. Hello, Nicole. Your grandmother has told me all about you. So for all of my life, in honour of my grandmother, Prince Edward has been my favourite member of the royal family.
Yay! I love that
I bet
story.
you've never had a Prince Edward as your answer before.
Once I had a Prince Anne, and that nearly blew my hat off, but Prince Edward.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I thought me writing to Stuart Wagstaff was weird when I was a kid.
Stuart Wagstaff. That's
Blankety
a great
blanks.
That's a great story.
Yeah. You're a big letter writers in your family, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah, always
Sounds like
writers.
you're sort of growing up in almost a kind of a Enid Blyton sort of a
Yes,
world.
yeah,
where,
very much so. Are we allowed to say that? She's a bit politically
Oh,
incorrect
she's
now,
been
but
cancelled, has she?
I
Yeah.
think so. But I
Okay.
love Enid
Yeah,
Blyton. I have all of hers too. Yeah. Yes.
All right. Now, I suspect you would love a good dance. And what's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
Well, I was thinking about this, and the early part of my career was in the music industry. So you're asking me to pick a favourite child, and it's really hard. I could do all of the songs that I danced to in my youth, or, you know, I recently did the wedding music for a good friend of mine, and I would have to say the one song that I thought this is going to get the entire room onto the dance floor would have to be Uptown Funk.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's probably a generic answer that you get. Every person says no.
You wouldn't
Okay.
believe the things that people say, but I
okay.
love that song too.
Yeah,
Julio, get the stretch.
yeah. That's it.
Well, with that, I will say thank you, and it has been worth the wait.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely,
Thank you
Nicole.
so
It's
much.
just been wonderful. Thank you so much for being my guest. And we'll look forward to the launch of the book when it comes out.
Yes,
hopefully
I
this
will
time.
invite you to the launch.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, it's been wonderful.
Yeah,
So
good.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.
You've been listening to a 102.7 FM Toowoomba original podcast. For more podcasts or to listen to live and local Toowoomba radio, please visit 1027.com.au or download the Community Radio Plus app.